I'm very grateful for being invited to participate in this important panel today about with ending arms trade with Israel and protecting humanitarian aid workers in Gaza. I was particularly struck this past week by a photograph that was widely shared online, which captures the unity of these two issues. This photograph showed crates of humanitarian supplies being parachuted into northern Gaza, where starvation is widespread and famine is said by the United Nations to be imminent, while in the background, smoke is rising from yet another Israeli missile strike. The parachute aid was being delivered by the United States, as were the missiles being used by Israel to continue its military assault on Gaza. Has irony died that the United States and many other global North countries can continue to deliver billions of dollars to Israel in ongoing military aid to pursue a war that is arguably genocidal, while refusing to put any meaningful pressure on Israel to allow the quantities of aid to enter into Gaza as demanded by the International Court of Justice, or to force it to accept a ceasefire as demanded by the United Nations Security Council. That these global northern powers would be reduced to a performative theater of dropping aid in the midst of a man-made famine by parachute, which is dangerous, inefficient, and expensive compared to the alternative of bringing in aid through the existing land routes. I want to focus my remarks today on the growing call for a weapons ban with respect to Israel, so that we don't have to see these kinds of photographs again. Let me cite some of the responsible voices in the international human rights community who are demanding that these weapons transfers immediately and completely stop. In late February 2024, more than 40 UN special rapporteurs and human rights experts issued a statement stating that any transfer of weapons or ammunition to Israel that would be useful in its Gaza war is likely to violate international humanitarian law and must cease immediately. They went on to state that the state parties to the International Arms Trade Treaty have treaty obligations to deny arms exports if they know that the arms would be used to commit international crimes, or if there is an overriding risk that the arms transfer could be used to commit serious violations of international humanitarian law. This reasoning is consistent with the provisional measures orders issued by the International Court of Justice at the end of January, that there is a plausible risk of genocide in Gaza, and they continue in serious harm to civilians since then. The UN human rights experts noted that the Genocide Convention of 1948 requires state parties to employ all measures reasonably available to them to prevent genocide in another state as far as possible. Earlier in February, the Dutch Court of Appeal ordered the Netherlands to halt its export of F-35 fighter parts to Israel, given the clear risk that they may be used for committing serious violations of international humanitarian law in Gaza. And in late March, the Foreign Minister of Canada, my country, said that Canada would freeze new arms export permits to Israel following the passage of a non-legally binding resolution in the Canadian House of Commons, which called for an end, and I'm quoting, of further authorization and transfer of arms exports to Israel to ensure compliance with Canada's arms export regime, unquote. And this past Friday, April 5th, the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, by a vote of 28-6 with 13 abstentions, adopted a resolution calling on all countries to cease the sale, transfer, and diversion of arms, munitions, and other military equipment to Israel. Will this be heard where it needs to be heard? In the United States, in Germany, the United Kingdom, France, Denmark, and Italy. This is particularly pressing in the United States, which supplies almost 70% of the global weapons sales to Israel. This past February, the Biden administration issued a national security memo, which states that the U.S. Departments of State and Defense will require written assurances from countries that receive U.S. military aid that they are to be in compliance with international law. As well, the U.S. Congress has already adopted legislation, the Leahy Act, which prohibits the sale of military arms and weapons from the United States to countries in violation of human rights standards. Successive American administrations have never applied this to Israel, and from recent comments by senior U.S. spokespersons that they see no evident violations by Israel of international crime in its military operations in Gaza, this appears unlikely to change in the foreseeable future. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that the arc of history bends slowly, but it bends towards justice. The Reverend Jesse Jackson importantly added to this that this arc of history doesn't bend by itself. We have to make it bend. Here is an important hinge of history where, with determination and purpose, we can bend that arc even further towards justice. Thanks very much.